everybody. Happy Tuesday. And man, oh man, am I late with Get Live with Dracaena Wines today. But it's still Tuesday and I am here. So today's topic, we are going to be talking about must and pumice. So I think that these are two terms that we hear all of the time when you are talking about winemaking, or if you're in the at a winery or whatever. These terms kind of come up all the time. And I was like, well, maybe people don't know what this is. So it is going to, must and pumice are super, super, super important when it comes to the winemaking process. And so before we actually get into what the must and pumice is, we need to backtrack a little bit and get into the vineyard. So as the season or as the vintage kind of progresses, chemical changes are occurring inside and outside of the berries. So outside, we start to see that color change, that veraison. And yes, here's a little fact. White grapes go through veraison also. It's just not as obvious. They kind of go to that grayish color. Okay, they do change the color. We just see that beautiful purple color in the red grapes. Okay, internally is also seriously important. What we're looking for are sugar levels, acid levels, and more importantly, the relationship between those two, sugar and acid together. We're concerned about the phenolics and of course the flavonoids that are going in. So as we go through the as we go through the vineyard, we are keeping track of all of these things, and then ultimately we're going to decide that it is the ideal time to harvest the fruit. So once we harvest the fruit, we then are going to bring it into the winery. And once it's in there, we want to make sure that we keep the temperature nice and cool, because if it goes too high, we're going to start fermenting prior to what we want it to. And during this process, we are going to, there is a little bit of difference between red wines and white wines, and there's options that winemakers can do in order to get the finished product that they are interested in. So like we have like whole cluster, destemmed, carbonic maceration, semi-carbonic. So these are all options that we can decide what we want to do, and they give us an end result. Okay, so now we're getting closer to this must and pumice. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to crush the fruit. And again, here we go, carbonic maceration. Well, that's a little bit off. And if you want to know what that is, I have done another Get Live about carbonic maceration. But this is where we have that difference between white and red wine. So during the white wine making process, the fruit is quickly separated from the solids. And what this does is it really kind of prevents the juice from picking up the tannins. But in the red wine making process, the juice is left to remain in contact with the solids, and this allows the finished product to deepen in color. We're going to add those flavors. We're going to add those tannins to the wine. And then we're going to allow fermentation to begin. And we can either choose commercial yeast or the naturally occurring yeast that are on the grapes and in the winery. Okay? And now this is where must comes into play. So the term must, okay, so here we go. The term must actually is derived from a Latin term, vinum mustum, and this means young wine. So what it is the combination of the freshly pressed juice, the seeds, the stems, the skins. All of this is known as must. So all of that mucky stuff is must. So this mixture, it's thick, it's chunky, and since the yeast haven't yet gone through fermentation, it is super, super, super high in sugars. Okay. Now the solids can make up about 25% of that entire total weight of the must. And when fermentation is complete, we're going to then press that juice off of all of that solid and juice, and that's when we get to pumice. Okay, so the pumice is just the solids. Okay, and that's the seeds, the stems if we did whole cluster, the skins. That solid stuff is called pomace, and it actually can make a cake. It looks like when you press it, all that juice out, it gets really, really solid, and it is this cake-like structure, okay? And now this pomace typically can be returned to the vineyard, and it is used as natural fertilizer, but in some cases, it is used in additional winemaking processes. So such as susarev, grappa, and my favorite, doble pasta. These are 3 examples where that pomace is used in an additional winemaking process. So the first one occurs mostly in Germany, and susarev is, or susari, I'm going to say it wrong again, Surreserve, is a wine that is typically found, like I said, in the German regions. Now, the reason why this happens is because Germany is typically extremely cold. The vineyards are found at high altitudes, and because the vineyards are, don't see a lot of sunlight, it's difficult for that fruit to fully ripen, and that leads to lower sugar levels. And as we know, lower sugar levels means lower alcohol. So in order to combat these low sugar levels and to maintain that sweetness in these regions, what they do is the German winemakers created this process, and what they do is they take that pomace that has been sterilized and they add it back, and it allows for fermentation to occur before all of that sugar, the original sugar, has been fermented. So what that does is it allows it to increase the alcohol while retaining some of that structure and that sugar. But of course, it's Germany and there's regulations. So Swiss Reserve cannot have more, or you can't use more than 15% of that pomace in order to make that wine. Now, one that most people I think have heard of before is going to be grappa. So grappa also uses this pomace, this second, those solids, and it's an Italian spirit whose process, again, just like the Germans, is extremely regulated. So what they do is the winemakers are going to take that leftover pomace from both red grapes and white grapes, and they call the white pomace virgin, and it is still required because it still requires fermentation. So the pomace then goes through a distillation process, which involves alternating heating and cooling. And what this does is concentrate down that alcohol, and we get this clear distillate that is then diluted with some water, and it can either be bottled right then, or sometimes they put it in stainless steel or oak and allow it to mature for up to 18 months. Now, grappa, it's a, how do I put that nicely? It's an acquired taste. I know people who absolutely love it, but it is a strong flavored, strong wine. And I think it's something that everybody should try, but I think you kind of have to get a little bit used to it. Now, the last way that we can use these, this pomace is in doble pasta, which is absolutely my most favorite, and apparently I did not save the image, but it is actually, if anybody has ever tasted drunken goat cheese, this is actually using doble pasta. And doble pasta is a process that's found in the Dracaena, which is in western central Spain, and what the term translates to is double pulp. And that's exactly what's happening. So in the DO, what they do is they are making their rosato, so their rosé wine, from the Bobal grape. And during the process, they take the crushed grapes, they are fermented, and they are added to it some additional skins. And what this does is create an extremely dark and concentrated wine. So we can also find the same doble pasta process in some other DOs such as Jumilla, Yacla, and Alicante, but those typically are using Monastrell instead of Bilbao. And as I said, if you have ever had drunken goat cheese, then that is actually the goat cheese is dunked and soaked into doble pasta wine that is actually the Monastrell. And that's what gives it that flavor and that color. And by far, one of my all-time favorite cheeses out there. So if you've never had drunken goat, you can pretty much find it everywhere. Go give it a try. And then that's a great way to kind of get a representation of what Pomace can do to the flavors. And then, check out the DOs, Utiel Requena or Jumilla to find wines that are doble pasta. Go grab yourself a grappa or go check out some German wine regions that do the South Reserve. And that's it. Okay. If you have any questions about must or Pomace, please ask them down below. Also, if you have a topic that you would like me to talk about in the future, please let me know. I would love to have some ideas. We're starting to really scratch my head to figure out what to talk about next. Just any winemaking concept. Oh, thank you for the hearts. Let me know what you would like. And remember, head on over to, check out the rest of my Instagram feed to see what else is going on. And if you're in Paso, hey, come by downtown, say you've watched some IG Lives, and come give our wines a taste. Let me know what else you'd like to learn about, and I'll talk to you soon. Have a great night and have a great week. Hey, how are you guys? Looking forward to seeing you soon. Anyway, stop on by the website, check out more things, read more posts about behind the scenes winemaking process, and I will see you soon. Slancha.